Heather Morehouse, we come over to you and a presentation on Guy Mercer's work.
Okay, can everyone see that and hear me okay?
Yeah.
See the present? Great. Thanks there, Nick. So first of all, apologies to you all from Guy, who can't be here to present his work himself. He's in the final throes of his PhD write-up, so as you can imagine, very busy. But Guy spent some time with us at EarthWatch last September and October as part of an internship program looking at developing a phosphate model using the automated sensors that we have deployed in the Evenlode. So this is Guy, and his PhD is actually nothing related to water quality. He's looking at the role of insecticide on wild bee populations as well. So quite interesting work. So, as I said, Guy, as part of his internship, wanted to develop a phosphate model using the automated sensors that we have deployed upstream and downstream of Milton under Wychwood and Shipping Norton sewage treatment works in the catchment. Now, sensors, particularly high frequency sensors, monitoring 15-minute intervals as these sons do. The technology to monitor phosphate isn't really out there, or if it is, it's not at that high frequency scale or commercially available as yet. So this was a way of looking at if we could use the variables that the SONs measured to develop a model that would predict what the phosphate in the river would be. And he validated that using the Citizen Science Freshwater Watch test kits that have been used by all our catchment champions around the Evenlode. So here's a map. It's a bit busy, but there you've got the sewage treatment works and the SONs, which are the green stars, again, upstream, downstream of those two treatment works there. So in order to kind of validate your model, you need to monitor the rivers at different times of the day, because we know that the sewage treatment works, particularly, of course, thinking downstream, when they discharge the final effluent, we've seen this change in water quality. So we know at different times within the diurnal or 24 cycle, they have an influence on water quality. And indeed, even upstream and unimpacted rivers, you will see this kind of 24-hour difference in different parameters, such as dissolved oxygen, etc., etc. So you kind of need to capture these different times. Also need to think about different weather conditions, because we know that rainfall and lower flows change how nutrients are delivered and processed as well within the river. But we were restricted because, you know, for health and safety, we didn't want to get Guy going out in the middle of the night sampling. Also, you know, his internship was a very set period of time. And that was one of the biggest kind of challenges, was that actually when Guy started his sampling, we were experiencing one of the kind of driest, I think, Septembers. So we were kind of like doing rain dances and hoping that he could capture that. And eventually he did. Using the phosphate test kits also had limitations, and what we found that we really kind of had to think about was the phosphate freshwater watch test kits are only sensitive to about 1 milligram per litre, and sadly, particularly downstream of sewage treatment works, all the kind of phosphate freshwater watch phosphate test kits were measuring this 1 milligram per litre. So phosphates were incredibly high. So then we had to get diluting these samples in order to kind of pull out the kind of higher values to get a range of phosphate samples. And again, that is detailed how he did that in the report. But we found, because sadly of the high phosphate loads, that most of the measurements that Guy took were above the 0.1 milligram per litre threshold. So what that means is that when he was looking at developing the model, he couldn't produce a very sensitive model. So he couldn't produce a model that predicted very, absolute values or values within the ranges that we see in the freshwater watch test kits, if that makes sense. But what it could do is develop a model which could tell you whether your threshold was below or above that 0.1 milligram per litre of phosphate, a threshold that's used by DEFRA and others to determine poor phosphate conditions. So when he was developing this model, he ran various statistics. Many of the parameters that are measured by the SONS, there are 9 different parameters. A lot of them are collinear, meaning they kind of behave the same. So we had to kind of remove that effect, because that can alter the model and sensitivity of the model output. And he produced a logistic regression model using pH, specific conductivity, and tryptophan, which he found produced a model of around 92% accuracy. So that basically means that by looking at the pH, specific conductivity, and tryptophan measurements from the SONS, inputting those into the model, he could accurately predict the phosphate at that time in those rivers. So to test the model, he used the SONS data from last year in 2022 to look at how many times the river was exceeding the 0.1 milligram per litre phosphate condition. And this table shows in the first 2 columns those sites that are downstream of sewage treatment works. At Cornwall Farm, which is downstream of Chipping Norton, we're seeing this threshold being exceeded quite a lot from the get-go, from March onwards through to August, which is really high. And again, we've often seen through the citizen science monitoring that phosphate values are much higher in late summer when the river flows are lower, and so producing this kind of concentration effect, indicating that because of the constant discharge of treated effluent, it's concentrating those nutrients. Whereas at Little Stock House, downstream of Milton under Wychwood sewage treatment works, you can see that seasonal progression to higher phosphate values later on in the summer. Heath Farm upstream, again, is not exceeding that phosphate threshold, but the Old Piggery upstream of Chipping Norton, which we've kind of identified through the SONS and are investigating further, we're seeing kind of some kind of impact that behaves quite similarly to sewage treatment work discharges, and there you can see the model predicted that phosphate thresholds were exceeded 91% of the time in August. And so following that, Guy recommended several steps that could help improve and validate the model further, such as sampling throughout the year. Again, he was restricted to the time within his internship. He also stated looking at site-specific factors. As we know, rivers even in very close proximity, sites in very close proximity can behave quite differently according to a variety of different factors, and that would help kind of improve that model further. But I would recommend reading the full report for more information, and that's available on our Freshwater Watch platform in our publications page. So thank you. I hope that made sense. I will stop sharing. Any questions, Vaughn?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's really interesting, and using those other parameters is to build that surrogate. So a couple of questions. I mean, some of the stuff that WASP have been doing and Peter Hammond's looked at has shown that concentrations are a lot greater of certain determinants during the night period. So that's one that you'd want to maybe look at longer. And then two others quickly, can you put the link up on the chat box, please? And then is that model transferable, or do we have to do that for every river?
Yeah, so that's one thing that kind of Guy mentioned, is that looking at how the site-specific factors influence that model and testing it across other, using other sites to test the model would help understand, to what extent. But I imagine, yes, it probably is a case of those factors, such as I'm thinking about the hydrology, etc., etc.
So got to rebuild the model each time, possibly. Is that what?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay, shame, but I understood. I get it. Yeah, but it would be, if we could build a more universal model, that would be fantastic. Okay,
I mean, sounds an interesting sort of, not proof of concept, but sort of, indication of a way forward, which we could perhaps pick up on and develop a bit further.
There was a chap who also has been looking at SONS. I've forgotten his name, and he was doing something similar, and had been working with Kate Heppel in the chess. I'll try and find more details on that and put in the chat, because that's quite interesting as well. And again, found a lot of, those parameters like specific conductivity and turbidity are actually very useful and tell you a lot about the river.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Oh, Owen.
Yeah. So just a comment. So the Environment Agency, their reports told us that Thames Water failed to fit EDM equipment to 40% of their storm overflows in 2022. So it's likely that there might be more storm overflows at Chipping Norton. I think Jeff from WASP has looked into this, and I'll have to look into it more to follow up on that. But it is likely there's more storm overflows at Chipping Norton, which might be causing that spike at the upstream Sond. There was an event on in Henley-on-Thames last night, and it was shown that there's multiple storm overflows at certain sewage treatment works. So it's just worth noting that might be what's affecting the upstream Sond. But it would have to, I guess it would need further investigation, but it's just something to consider.
Cool. Rosie.
Sorry, Owen, can you clarify what you've just said?
Yeah. So, what? Sorry, which part?
The bit about Thames Water failing to something.
Yeah. So there was a report that came out. It was on an Excel sheet from the agency, and it said that there was Thames Water in 2021 said that they had about 470 storm overflows, and then the following year there was 700. So that meant that there was EDMs weren't announced in that year. So they may not be on the storm overflow map that we see on the website.
Okay. Oh, right. So this is referring to we had 465 permitted storm overflows with EDM monitors. And then in 2022, we have a change because we were working with the EA to prioritize which ones we rank, and we now have 777.
Yes.
But Chipping Norton, I think, does have an EDM. So it's
Yes,
other sites. Okay.
Yeah, it has an EDM, but I'm just saying that there might be another storm pipe at Chipping Norton.
Okay.
Yes, it's not clear, is it, Rosie, where those other undeclared assets were, and despite the explainer, it's still not clear why Thames suddenly found a huge number of previously undeclared EDMs, which meant that your EDM compliance went from 100% as one of the best companies down to less than 66%, I think, last year. Yeah, and what made a multi-million-pound company suddenly look in the cupboard and find a load of extra CSOs he didn't really know it had?
Okay.
Maybe it could look in the cupboard and find a few more billion quid it didn't know it had, but there you go.
There we go. There we go. Can always rely on the ECP to. Right. Any more specific questions for Heather? No. Okay. Heather, thank you very much. And yeah, I quite understood that we weren't able to hear from the man himself, but grateful if you could sort of pass on our thanks back to him for that interesting work. Say, you get the sense there's a little sort of germ of something there that would be good to do something further with.